In this video, we're going to look at a couple examples for how to factor quadratics. This first example that I'm giving you is 6x squared plus 5x minus 4. We need to factor this. I'm going to start out by multiplying together my first and last terms. We're going to multiply those together. I'm going to write it out over here to the side. 6x squared times negative 4 would be negative 24x squared. And I want to list factors of 24. So it could be 4x and 6x. It could be 2x and 12x. Maybe 3x and 8x. And then I want to look at those factors and see which pair of those factors is going to give me 5x, or my middle term. My middle term is 5x. I need to try to get 5x from these factors. And since my 24 is negative, I need to be subtracting those two numbers to get 5. Well, obviously 3x and 8x can give me 5 if I subtract. 8 minus 3 would be 5. I want to get a positive 5x, so I'm going to put a positive on the 8, and I'm going to put a negative on the 3. And I'm going to come back over here to my quadratic and rewrite it, keeping the 6x squared, but instead of 5x, I'm going to put minus 3x plus 8x. And then I'm going to keep the minus 4 at the end. So in that step, what I did is I replaced 5x with negative 3x plus 8x. Now I'm going to do something which is called factoring by grouping. And what that means is that I'm going to group together these first two terms, 6x squared and negative 3x, and I'm going to look at those and say, what can I factor out of just those two terms? What factors do they have in common? And that would be 3x. If I factor out a 3x from 6x squared, I'm left with 2x minus, and if I factor out 3x from 3x, then of course I'm left with 1. Now I'm going to group together the last two numbers, and I'm going to ask myself the same question. What factor do both of those terms have in common that I could factor out? I'm going to keep that plus sign that's there, and I'm going to factor out a 4. If I factor out 4 from 8x, I'm left with 2x. And if I factor out 4 from minus 4, I'm left with minus 1. Now at this step, the numbers that are in these parentheses, they should always come out the same. If you get something different there, then that means you made a mistake. Even if it's just a sign difference, we need to go back and fix it. These two parentheses should be exactly the same. So now what I have is a term 3x times 2x minus 1 plus another term 4 times 2x minus 1. Both of those terms have 2x minus 1. And so I'm going to factor out 2x minus 1. And when I do that, I'm left with 3x plus 4. 3x plus 4. And so 2x minus 1 times 3x plus 4, that is the factored version of the quadratic 6x squared plus 5x minus 4. Let's look at one more example. In this example, I have 5x squared plus 13x minus 6. I'm going to start out the same way, multiplying the first term and the last term together, and I'm going to write it off over here to the side. Negative 30x squared, because 5x squared times negative 6 gives me negative 30x squared. Now I'm going to list my factors of 30. I could do 5x and 6x. It could be 3x and 10x. It could be 2x and 15x. And I'm looking for factors that will give me 13 in the middle. Now this question is a little bit tricky because if you notice, 3 plus 10 gives me 13, but 15 minus 2 gives me 13. So I've got two sets of factors that could give me 13. But remember, my 30x squared is negative. And that means that I need to be subtracting to get my middle term, which means I'm going to use the 2x and the 15x, because I need to have one number that's positive and one number that's negative. Now I want to get positive 13 in the middle, so I'm going to make my 15x positive, and I'm going to make the 2x negative. And those are going to be my choice. So I'm going to come back over here to my quadratic, and I'm going to rewrite 5x squared stays the same, but instead of 13x, I'm going to write minus 2x plus 15x. And then I'm going to keep the minus 6 at the end. So again, all that I did is I changed 13x to be negative 2x plus 15x. Now I'm ready to factor by grouping. I'm going to group together the first two terms and see what common factor can I factor out of those two numbers. Well, the only thing those have in common is an x. So I'm going to factor out an x. If I factor out an x from 5x squared, then I have 5x. If I factor out an x from minus 2x, then I'm left with minus 2. Now I'm going to look at the second group and factor. 15x minus 6. Well, I can factor out of that a 3. I'm going to keep that plus sign that's there, and I'm going to put 3. If I factor out 3 from 15x, I have 5x. If I factor out 3 from negative 6, I'm left with negative 2. Now notice again, inside the parentheses, both of them say the same thing, and that has to happen every time. If they're not exactly the same, then you've made a mistake somewhere along the way. I have two terms here, x times 5x minus 2 plus 3 times 5x minus 2, and both of those terms have a 5x minus 2. So I'm going to factor that out, and when I do that, I'm left with x plus 3. X plus 3. And so my factored version of 5x squared plus 13x minus 6 is 5x minus 2 times x plus 3.